Probably your answers to these questions that I'm about to ask to get us started, they've probably changed a little bit because of COVID, um, but we'll see. So, how sick do you have to be to go to the doctor? Nothing's happening. Something. There's supposed to be a picture of a doctor on the screen. Okay. Okay, so maybe it depends on the ailment itself. Like what kind of sickness? Okay, because you could be pretty sick with something like the flu, but you also know that if you don't catch it early enough and start taking that Tamiflu early enough, then it's not really going to do you much good anyway, or whatever, you know. Okay, so let me ask you this: Are you one? Is there anybody in here? I'm curious. Who is one that, as soon as you think you're sick, you're going to go see the doctor? Really? Depends on what it is. If it's a sinus infection, you're heading to the doctor because you know what that feels like, and you know you're going to need some antibiotics. Okay, all right. Who's waiting till the absolute last minute to go to the doctor? uh, all right. You, you you're probably the ones who have had something like a sinus infection and put it off and put it off, and then by the time you would have gone to the doctor anyway, you're just about getting through it. You know, that 10-day mark, right? You wait until Heather says, please go to the doctor. Right, right, right. Okay, so maybe going to the doctor is not going to change that much in how long it takes to get over what you're dealing with, right? Okay, so similar question. Well, this is not connecting. I don't know what's happening. I'll turn it off and turn it back on. See if that makes a difference. I got it. I don't know if I did that or if y'all did that. All right, similar question. How much pain or how bad does your situation need to be for you to start taking medication? Do you take medication just as soon as you start feeling something, or are you waiting until it's really bad? Say that. What? Say that again. Past being really bad, it's got to be like you're on your deathbed kind of thing before you're going to take any medication. Worst patient ever. All right. What else? How else? How do y'all feel about it? What do you do with medications? I mean, some medications you're going to be taking every day just as a natural part of things, right? How much pain do you have to be in? Okay, and that's like a vitamin supplement or something. Is that right? No. Okay. Okay, so maybe if you feel something coming on and you have something that you think's going to help it, you can go ahead and start taking that quickly, push through it quicker. We we live in a world, and I know you know this, but we live in a world that is completely and totally different from the world our parents grew up in, and for sure our grandparents grew up in. And aside from all the ways that we could talk about that that's true, it's especially true when it comes to modern medicine, right? Think about, and even in our own lifetimes, think about how much has changed when it comes to medications and what we would call modern medicine. All right, think about the surgeries that used to require multiple nights in the hospital that are now outpatient. Think of surgeries and procedures that now you might be in the hospital for a couple days that used to be many days, um, and then think about surgeries that used to be really kind of touch and go, heart surgery. Somebody's having to have major heart surgery. That's still a big deal today, but nothing like it was even 20, 30 years ago, because it's just become so much more common. The procedures themselves have become so much more regular. The doctors are doing them on a regular basis. The method itself, or the tools, and all these different things that have become so much better and so much more advanced. Medications also, think about that. There's so many different types now. The improvements in the medication itself and the way it interacts with our bodies. So let me ask you this. What are some of the benefits of the types of medications that are available today? Okay, sometimes you don't have to go to the doctor because maybe it's an over-the-counter medication that's available now that you used to have to, wait and get a prescription and go through that whole process. Yeah. What else? I think, Sarah Neil? Okay. Right? Or up? Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Just by taking some medication, you can manage so many different things related to your body, whether that's blood pressure or blood sugar or cholesterol, and on and on and on and on the list goes for the different things that you can manage pretty easily today with just a pill or a couple pills or whatever. Hopefully not the 60 pills that are up here on the screen. Uh, but it's amazing to see how that has progressed, even in our own lifetimes. But let me ask you this: everything about medication is not positive, is it? What are some of the negatives to modern medications? Okay, so you might become dependent upon that medication when you don't need to be. Okay? Okay, all right. This false sense of security. I think somebody over here was going to say something, maybe. Yes, ma'am? Okay. You might be taking blood pressure medication and then need this, I don't know, cold medication or something, and they don't interact the way that they're supposed to, and then you've got real problems, right? And sometimes you don't know that that's the reason for what's going on, and you're feeling terrible, or things are. I mean, I know it can mess with your mental status. It really will mess with your brain sometimes, and really it's just about the doctors having to try and find the keep those medications from interacting improperly. Side effects, yes. Okay, all right. No matter what kind of medication it is, there are side effects. Uh, you know, it, it, it just even something as simple as an Advil. You got to read all. You don't have to. What am I saying? But there's a list of side effects. There's a list of warnings. Don't take it on an empty stomach. Don't take too many in a certain amount of time, and all these things that can go wrong with if you depend too much on this medication. It can be a problem. Um, Dosage adjustments. If they if you need a certain medication and they think you need this amount and you don't actually need that much, bad things can happen. or if they don't give you enough, or whatever. So there's a lot of positives and a lot of negatives when it comes to the advancements that we have today when it comes to modern medicine. As we continue to study and consider how to live life in the face of death, and as we try to do a better job of coming to grips with our own mortality, one of the discussions that is often brought up regarding someone who is nearing the end of life, or someone who is facing a terminal illness or something of that nature, a lot of the conversation has a tendency to be around what we call quality of life. Now, what is this conversation usually about? Okay, controlling the pain, how much the patient is able to enjoy living. What else? Okay, freedom, elaborate on that a little bit. Okay, freedom to move about and go as they desire and not be stuck bedridden. Okay. Okay, what do you mean by that? Okay, right, 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 right. So yes, so whether or not you are able to get out and move around, that may matter a lot more for one person than it would for another. And I think when you talk about things like a DNR, a do not resuscitate plan for somebody, there's a whole lot of questions to answer, right? And there's a whole lot of scenarios to think about and circumstances to consider, and you have to decide, okay, in this situation, yes, the quality of life is such that I would be okay continuing to live that way. But in this situation, no thanks. Go ahead and pull the plug. Don't resuscitate. Whatever the terminology is that you want to use. So the question is, how bad do your circumstances have to be before you'd say, "Let me go"? But I want us to consider something. Throughout our lives, what you might call quality of life changes, doesn't it? Especially as you age, right? Does a deteriorating quality of life necessarily mean that that life or the value of that life is in any way diminished? See some people shaking their heads no. That's the right answer. No, of course not. Because if it did, if just the deterioration, the natural deterioration of life was in some way diminishing of the value of that life, then we would be in a completely different situation where we would say, well, at a certain age point, you're done, whether you want to be or not. Just because there is pain in life, just because the ability to live your life is difficult, does not diminish the value of life. Okay, and I'm gonna say that again because I want you to remember that, because we're going to step away from this for just a minute. Just because there is pain in life, or just because living life is difficult, does not diminish the value of that life. Now, moving forward, we said there are a lot of negatives when it comes to medication and modern medicines, right? Um, there are all kinds of potentially hazardous situations But if you have an infection in a wound, let's say, or if you have a broken bone, or if your appendix is about to burst, are you ready to give up on modern medicine? No. Why not? Because you need it? Because, what did you say, Barbara? Because it will save your life, right? Your life most likely depends on modern medicine in those types of circumstances. An infected wound, a broken bone, appendicitis, those are scenarios that actually could have been fatal, or many times likely would have been fatal 200 years ago. Or even today in certain parts of the world, right? But they are easily fixed in our culture with what we have available to us today. So in a lot of ways, we could say that modern medicine is a gift from God. We are blessed to be living in a day and a time when it's available to us. We're blessed to be living in a country, in a society, culture, whatever, that allows us to have these advanced modern medicines available to us that actually then allow life expectancy to be much longer, right? As of 2014, it's a little bit old information, but as of 2014, the population, or the portion of the population in the U.S. that was over the age of 65 was 15.7%. And because of the continuing advancement of modern medicines, that is a number that is expected to be well over 20% of the population within the next couple decades. But do we always treat medicine as a gift from God? Do we receive it in that way? This is a bit of a rhetorical question, because I want to suggest to you this morning that sometimes we treat things like modern medicines as a bit more like an idol, something that we cling to. And I think this is what Terry was getting at earlier, because it can be something that we cling to so tightly in an effort to avoid the reality of death. Especially when we consider the fact that medicines come in all shapes and sizes. Now, I do not mean the size of the pill you have to swallow. Okay? These medicines that our culture offers us come in all shapes and sizes and varieties, and I want to talk about a few of them that you don't normally think of in this way, maybe. There's this commercial that I keep seeing on TV, and whoever this woman is says, "I was a cover girl then, and I'm a cover girl now," to which I'm like, okay, who are you? What? I have no idea. But that's beside the point. Do you know what she's advertising? Cosmetics, makeup, right? But what really got my attention was the kind of makeup it is, or well, the kind of makeup they claim it is. Do you know what new line or whatever it is? It's called the new Simply Ageless makeup. Yeah, right. This is, I think, just one example of some of the medicines that our culture offers us that have been become very commonplace and very familiar to us, and we don't think twice about it. But in a lot of ways, these are attempts to divert our attention away from the fact that, hey, guess what? We are still aging. We are still dying creatures. What are some other examples aside from just makeup that would fit this type of medicine? Okay, hair dye. Yeah. What else? Oh, okay. All the various supplements, um, turmeric. Yeah, I have no idea what that is. I've just seen the commercial. Yeah, and collagens and this supplement and that supplement, and that is how you end up with about 50 pills every day when you take all those. All right. What else? What else falls under this kind of quote unquote medicine? Okay. A memory supplement. Yeah, yeah, like, yeah. Right, right, right. Sure, sure. Because there's so many out there, and so this comes in the form of pills. It comes in the form of makeup and hair dye and even cosmetic surgeries and procedures and all of these kinds of ways that we try to avoid the reality that we are aging, dying creatures. But this is just one example. This is just one type of medicine that's out there. We're also distracted by the latest technologies, the latest fads, or whatever. Now, what would you say is the underlying purpose of most modern technology and advancements in technology? An advertisement? I think it's a little more to it than that. Okay, uh, yes, that is true. Let me. Okay, okay, that's kind of where I was aiming. Not the purpose of the manufacturers who want you to continue to buy ones and want to continue to advertise to you and those kinds of things. There is an underlying element to that. But the way they get you to buy technology today is by pointing out how this item is going to make your life easier, right? Which makes life easier, right? And that very often is the way that it is promoted is that your life will be made easy because by using our new product, you can get done with whatever this is on your schedule twice as fast, 10 times as fast, whatever it is. And that goes for so many different things out there that push us on to the next thing. And we move faster today from one thing on our list to the next, to the next, to the next than I think humanity ever has. Consumerism in our culture has created a medicine that we don't always think about. Because when we are constantly reminded of our next appointment or that next message that somebody sent us or that next email or what someone else is doing on social media or what's going on in the news or what's going on in the world, and we constantly are bombarded with these messages because of technology and the ways that we can go faster from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, you know what we don't have time to think about? Our mortality. And how really from one day to the next, that's we are still approaching death. And it creates this sense of control that's not real. And we keep ourselves engaged, we keep ourselves busy because we don't want to think about our own mortality. We don't want to think about that family member who can't get out of the house because they're getting closer and closer to death. One more example. One author that I've been reading even suggests that we have we have become conditioned to receive news reports about wars and drownings and shootings and all these kinds of examples of death. And in a way, they confirm for us that death is something that happens to other people. Because the way it is often presented is these deaths are horrific because they could have been avoided. Or it's presented as it's something that should have been avoided, depending on what the situation is, right? Because those are the kinds of deaths we normally hear about in the news, right? And so then, so many different people in our culture can capitalize on that and say, you know what? If you have a better security system on your house, if you buy our security system, you can avoid that horrific break-in and shooting that happened, 2 weeks ago. Or if you support this political candidate or that political policy, then all these senseless deaths in this particular situation can be avoided. Or war could be avoided. Or this or that could be avoided. And so we have a way of seeing death as something that happens out there. But if we do the right things, if we purchase the right things, if we vote a certain way, if we do this or we do that, then it could be avoided. And again, it's a type of medicine that we take to try and sweep away that concern for our own mortality. But the problem is that none of these modern medicines are ever going to help us focus on how to better treat and love our neighbors. Never going to help us better love our families, our coworkers. Instead, what actually happens is we end up fixating on trivial things. We end up focused on temporary. And what we have done is we have then created in our own minds our own definition of quality of life. My life has a certain quality because I have these things, or I am this busy, or I am whatever. I'm doing all these things that are helping me avoid thinking about death. We don't have time to think about death. We don't have time to look at how we are aging. If we keep death at bay through purchases and political choices, then we believe that we are going to be able to avoid pain and avoid the discomfort of death. And a part of that is because we have in some ways become convinced that the pain and difficulty of dealing with death diminishes our life. And this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. Just because there is pain in our life does not diminish the value of our life. Just because life is difficult to endure does not diminish the value of our life. Because all these medicines, and as I continue to try and use the air quotes around the word medicine, all these medicines that the world has to offer us have something in common. What is it called when the patient thinks they are benefiting from medication, but they're not actually taking real medication? The placebo effect. Yes. All right, the placebo effect is when you give a patient a sugar pill and they think it has cured their anxiety, or whatever. And really, it was all in their head to begin with. They just thought that they were being cured. All of these medicines that our culture has to offer us, that we've been talking about this morning, have a placebo effect. They give us the illusion of control. They give us the illusion of not having to think about or worry about death and dying and pain and suffering. And we think that it improves our quality of life. But I want us to take a few minutes this morning to look at what is described by God as a quality life. And I want you to recognize that in both of these passages, nowhere does Paul or Peter say anything about trying everything we can to avoid death. Now, I want us to take some time. I want us to really absorb what is written here. And so, for the benefit of those who may be watching online, and for those who may not be able to hear as well, especially if the heater starts running, if somebody else were to read, I'm going to go ahead and read these myself instead of asking for a volunteer. I want you to hear exactly what God is telling us quality life looks like. All right, and we're going to start with Romans chapter 12, and we'll start reading with verse 9. Let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay," says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Now turn over to 2 Peter chapter 1. We're going to start reading with verse 3. Second Peter chapter 1, verse 3. His divine power has granted to us all things that pertain to life and godliness through the knowledge of him who called us to his own glory and excellence, by which he has granted to us his precious and very great promises, so that through them you may become partakers of the divine nature, having escaped from the corruption that is in the world because of sinful desire. For this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue, and virtue with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with steadfastness, and steadfastness with godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. For if these qualities are yours and are increasing, they keep you from being ineffective or unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. For whoever lacks these qualities is so nearsighted that he is blind, having forgotten that he was cleansed from his former sins. Therefore, brothers, be all the more diligent to confirm your calling and election. For if you practice these qualities, you will never fall. For in this way there will be richly provided for you an inheritance into the eternal kingdom of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Again, notice what is not said. There's no concern for the end of life other than acknowledging the hope that we have beyond it. When we focus on all of the things that are going on in this world, and when we allow these placebos that exist in our world today to distract us, whether it's medications or technologies or cosmetics, what it distracts us from are the more important things in life. And we establish for ourselves what we think is a real quality life. But the reality is that we are aging and dying creatures. We cannot reverse that process no matter how hard we try. And in light of that, we ought to live this life, and we ought to define the quality of life the way God does. I really appreciated that in that last reading there in 2 Peter, how he encourages us to be effective in this life, to be fruitful in this life. And so much of what Paul writes in Romans 12 and what Peter writes here in the way that we build ourselves and the way that we construct our lives is about how we impact the lives of others. And that really has to be a significant, a monumentally important part of the quality of our life. It's how we impact the lives of others. So, well, let me stop there. See if there's anything else that you want to add, any questions or comments or anything that you have. Right, right, right. Euthanasia is a growing trend, and again, it comes back to what do we define as a quality life. Just because there is pain, just because the process of living life may be difficult, does not diminish the value of your life. Let's have a prayer together, and we'll be done this morning.